when you've lost the press, especially a press that has been so supine and so supportive of this administration, that has bent over backward to give them every break, then you're really, really in trouble, which is why we're having this extraordinary attempt to kind of set the record straight on an off-the-record basis.
That's Judith Miller. She's a former investigative reporter for the New York Times, and she's currently contributing editor of City Journal, and she's also our guest right now. Judith Miller, thanks for joining us this morning.
Nice to be with you.
So we had our off-the-record meeting yesterday. First of all, I want you to just put this in perspective a little bit. Obviously, we've heard Jonathan Harris of Politico say, we get off-the-record briefings all the time from various agencies. Why was this one different, and why did so many news agencies like the New York Times, Fox News, Huffington Post boycott this and say, to heck with you, Department of Justice, we want this briefing on the record or not at all?
Well, what we've had in this instance and what makes this different is that you've had a Justice Department that essentially, and in fact an Attorney General who assigned a warrant that made it a crime, potentially, to solicit information from sources. Well, that's kind of what we do, right? And the warrant was signed by the Attorney General himself, who then turned around and said, well, I never really wanted to criminalize the press. That wasn't our intention. He said he was just merely gathering information for a prosecution.
Well, and he's saying, listen, I feel your pain. I'm a progressive. I love the First Amendment. I did no way did I want this to be interpreted the way it was. So come to this briefing, and I'm going to explain myself to you.
Right.
But you can't talk about it. It's going to be off the record.
Well, that's preposterous at this point, given what we already know about this terrible, not just one incident, but in addition to the search warrant and subpoenas that were issued to Fox Rose's James Rosen, we also have the extraordinary document seizure from the Associated Press. So for them to turn around and say we're going to set the record straight and we're going to do it on an off-the-record basis so that you can't write about it and you can't print it, you can't broadcast it, what's the point? I mean, what's the point of playing their game? And I'm really surprised a little because the press has been so unskeptical for the most part of this administration. Surprised but delighted to see that so many news organizations took the view that they were not going to play this game any longer.
I want to change the topic just slightly because, I mean, you've actually put your money where your mouth is. I mean, you spent 85 days in the Gray Bar Hotel to protect a source. You know what it is to actually, stand up for the First Amendment. So I salute you for that. But second of all, that all had to do with the Valerie Plame affair and Scooter Libby. Well, now we know that the person who was very much at the core of some of that case has been nominated to be the next FBI director. We're talking about James Comey. How do you feel about that?
Well, I haven't written about it yet, and I tell you the truth, I'm so focused on figuring out what has happened at the Justice Department with respect to reporters, because my concern, and I don't think that this has received enough publicity, was the Attorney General's answer to a question that he was asked at the hearing on May 15th. One of the congressmen asked him, well, is this a practice? Do you target the press? Is this the way you do business? And he said, in response to that and the Justice Department has not gone back on this, that there were other requests that were sent back for modification. I think the press has to now push the Justice Department to ask the following question: how many more incidents like this have there been? How many more APs and James Rosens are there? What are the standards? Now, we know something about what happened at that meeting yesterday because some of the people who agreed to abide by the off-the-record rules did not abide by it and came out and immediately talked to the press. And the Justice Department now says two things that are contradictory. One, we're not going to do this again, and two, we didn't do anything wrong. And Eric Holder did not lie and did not mislead the people.
Judith, I just have to press you a little bit on the James Comey thing. I know you sort of definitely changed the conversation back, but really, I mean, this is the guy who was very much at the core of that whole affair. How do you feel about this guy being the FBI director?
Actually, he was not, in terms of my case, at the core of it. At the core of it it was Patrick Fitzgerald, who was also under consideration for this job and did not get the job. So James Comey has other credentials that endear him to this administration and should endear him to people who care about the First Amendment, such as his refusal to go along with a warrantless wiretapping program that ultimately Congress decided needed to be brought into a legal framework. And I think that Comey's record will be looked at very, very carefully by the people who will need to confirm him. And I'm going to wait and see how he addresses the issue of press freedom and the issues that we've been talking about.
Have you ever seen a time like this in your time as a reporter?
Oh, yes.
You think there are other...
In my time as a reporter, but
Well.
America, if you go back and look at America, we've had dreadful times in this country's history. We've had alien and sedition acts. We've had assaults on the media. We've had governments in the Pentagon Papers try and tell us we couldn't publish things that were historical documents about how we got into a war. There's a constant struggle here between the press and the people's right to know and the government. And that struggle is vital to who we are and what we are. And it's only when we forget about it or make excuses for the people who want to limit our liberties and restrict them and make them contingent upon their political goals that you get into trouble.
Judy Miller, she's a contributing editor of City Journal and an analyst on Fox News. Always love seeing you on the Fox News show there on Sundays.
Thank you so much.
Looking at the media.
Love listening to you when I'm in D.C.
Thanks for being on this morning on
Thank
Mornings
you.
on